Kiva asked me if I'd come and talk on Christian fellowship. Well, what I thought she said, will you come and talk on fellowship? I'm really good at fellowship. That's one of the big things I'm really good at. I think when the Lord passed those out, it wasn't like when he passed out noses, and I thought he said roses, and I wanted a large red one. But anyway, I got good on the fellowship. So I told Kiva I'd try to do a little talk today on Christian fellowship. Well, I got thinking about that. We're doing a repeat of this series on commitment that she did a couple of years ago. You know, I remember a young preacher one time that came to the church, and his first church, he was nervous, he worked, and he prepared, and he got the best sermon you ever seen prepared. So that first Sunday he gets up and he preaches it, and it went all perfect. Everybody come up after church and said, "Preacher, that's the best sermon we've had in years. You did an outstanding job of presenting it," and they bragged on him. So the next week he starts preparing his sermon. He thanks, and he prays, and he reads the Bible. He thanks some more, and he can't get anything together. Last Wednesday, I went over to the library to write a little list down. I couldn't think of anything. I just left the library, went and fooled around doing something else all day. So Thursday rolls down, and I got to do something. So I go back over to the library Thursday. It fell in place a little better. But this poor fella, he worked all week. He couldn't do nothing. Sunday morning comes, same time every week, you know. He said, "Well, I'll just re-give that sermon. It was pretty good last week. Maybe I can reword a few things and stuff." So he gets up and gives that sermon again. Went off flawless. He just did an outstanding job. Second time, just made it perfect. So third week, he starts preparing that sermon. He works, and Beelzebub was more influential than the good Lord was, and he comes to Sunday morning, he didn't have a thing down. He didn't even have a scripture. He said, "I don't know what I'll do. I'll just do it again. I got to have something. I got to get up there." So he got up and he preached that same sermon again. Well, after the service was over, lay leader Connie and PPR chair Jan, they catch him out back. And they said, "Preacher, you did a pretty good job, but you know you've preached that same sermon 3 weeks in a row." Well, they just embarrassed him to death, and he just blurted it out. He said, "Well, you hadn't learned the first one yet." So I kind of think that's what Kiva was leading at. Maybe we hadn't learned the first one yet, so we're going to get to try it again. Now let me see if I can catch back up with my notes, William. Okay, when she said talk on Christian fellowship, as I said, fellowship rang the bell with me. I can handle that end of it. So what do you think of when somebody says fellowship? What's your connotation of the word fellowship? And I decided I was going to call on people, and you just tell me what first thing. Okay, Eddie Hill, what comes to mind when you say fellowship?
Being with everyone like-minded in the same place.
Okay, fantastic. Connie Johnson, what do you think of when they say fellowship?
Covered dish.
That's what I think of. First thing I had down here is covered dish supper in the fellowship hall. I'm good at that. I'm really good at that. You know what I really remember, though? I know why they put a glass of water up here. What I really remember growing up in Oconee Church, when I was a little old boy about like Brant, I ran around the church and all I wore was boots. I don't even think I owned a pair of shoes. Both my parents worked at the boot shop. My grandpa worked at the boot shop. I got boots cheap. So I grew up in boots. I had one pair of Converse high-top tennis shoes that had last a year or two. But the rest of the time I had boots. They were work boots, they were dress boots. So I wore boots all the time. Well, Mr. Cribbs was an old man in our church at Oconee. He always had time to talk to me, but he always called me cowboy. And the only reason he called me cowboy is because I had them boots on. I had them on every Sunday. Every time we went somewhere, I had my boots on. So Mr. Cribbs called me cowboy. Now, Mr. Cribbs was kind of a special man in Oconee. He had the taxi for Oconee. He had an old 1950 four-door Plymouth. And for 50 cents, he'd come pick you up anywhere in town and take you to the grocery store, and he'd take you home when you got through shopping. He didn't have one of those little lighted little deals on top of the hood up there, on top of the roof, and he didn't have a big old sign on the side that says Cribbs Taxi Service. But if you need to go somewhere, you picked up the phone and they said, "Number, please," and you said, "The taxi," or gave 234, whatever what his number was, and you got Mr. Cribbs. Well, he was special to me because he paid attention to me. What made the difference wasn't that he called me cowboy, it was that he always had time to talk to me. He'd call me over, and he'd say, Jerry, you can eat more fried chicken than any boy I've ever seen. He said, I bet you can eat that whole fried chicken. I said, yes, sir, I think I can too, and I still can today. I love fried chicken. Earl Wayne Reese, that's too bad. I like fried chicken. The other thing I think of on fellowship, when somebody mentions the word fellowship, is Sunday school. We have a class named Fellowship Sunday School class. Connie is our teacher. Doris and I started going to it when Bill Glassford was the teacher. We were the youngest ones in the class, I guess probably in our early 30s. Everybody else in there were old. They had to be 50, maybe a few of them 60. But anyway, Bill used to always get me. He said, Jerry, what do you do coming to this old folks Sunday school class? I said, well, Bill, I love to listen to you, and I never agree with you, so I have to think all week about what you said. Well, that just tickled Bill Glassford to death. He just thrived on that. Somebody might not agree with him, but wasn't being offensive in the disagreement. The third thing I always thought of is a get-together, which is kind of what Eddie was talking about, just getting together and having a bunch of fellowship. But I remember lots of fun, and I remember lots of laughter. There was a group formed in this very church right here named the Sons of the Sons of the Sons of the Pioneers. Anybody remember that? I think it was started by Tommy Brummett, which was our preacher at that time, Mike Wines, Lewis Simmons, Earl Wayne Reese, E.C. Crump, and our own Eddie Hill composed this little group of Western singers. And they'd sing Tumbling Tumbleweeds and Happy Trails and all the old cowboy campfire signs. But their theme song was, and they sang at the Chamber of Commerce meetings, they sang at the Kiwanis Club, and they sang in our fellowship hall, and their theme song was Cigarettes, Whiskey, and Wild, Wild Women. And they would sing that, and the house would come down. Well, the funniest thing, you talk about laughter, was back in our fellowship hall, they were singing that to a group from the whole community was here. I bet we had 150, if not 175 people in the fellowship hall. They had their props. I think they maybe had sheepskin chaps on, sheepskin chaps. Had their big hats, bandanas. One or two of them had a lariat rope in their hands. It was authentic. So they'd get a glass, a clear glass, and fill it with iced tea. And Tommy Brummett, the preacher, when they got to that part of cigarettes and whiskey, he'd take a big old drink of that iced tea, and everybody just rolled, you know. Well, a certain church member swapped real whiskey for iced tea. So Tommy Brummett grabs that glass and goes all the way across the fellowship hall. If you were sitting in the front 5 rows, you got your whiskey for the day that day. So when I think of having lots of fun and having fellowship, I think of that group. So if you want some of the real intimate stories, talk to Eddie Hill back here. But then I got to realizing she had asked me to talk on Christian fellowship. Yes, not fellowship. Well, that changed my opinion of fellowship. Maybe a little, but not really. It still boiled down to having covered dish suppers. But the covered dish suppers wasn't necessarily for me getting all my fill of fried chicken I wanted. It was about that closeness I felt with the other church members. It was about being with my peers, being back there in the group, that we all had an opportunity to kind of witness to maybe some people that came for the first time to that church supper that day, or somebody who went invited that church supper, or somebody just didn't feel like they quite fit in that day. It was our chance to be the church at that covered dish supper. And I still think of our fellowship Sunday school class. I think of Connie Johnson teaching it now. I think of all the effort and time she puts in bringing us a lesson every Sunday. If you've never tried that, you ought to put that on your bucket list, because it is an undaunting task to have it every week. But you know what makes that fellowship Sunday school class something really special? Is I'm in there with my peers. I'm in there with my Christian friends. They have the same doubts. They have the same fears. They have the same disappointments. They have the same failures. And at our age now, they have the same ailments and health issues that the rest of us have. And I can go in there and talk to them. It empowers and reinforces my faith, and they're non-judgmental. Nobody's judging me in that Sunday school class every Sunday. They want to know what are the issues that concern you this week? And when I have them, I feel comfortable in telling you what they are. And they reinforce that faith I have. Also, I still think we have to get-togethers with lots of fun. That's part of it. But the other thing at those get-togethers, I may have the need to cry that week. It may not have been so dang good that week. I may really need to let my hair down. I can question my faith in that group, and they're not going to judge me on that. I can have some friends that will take the time to listen to me. You know, in this day, Bill Glassford was kind of my idol, if you want to use that loosely term these days. Bill, people used to get on to him. Bill, you stop. I'd go somewhere with Bill, and I'd say, I'll pick you up downtown on the square at 10 o'clock in the morning. Fine. He comes out of his office. He stops at this car with somebody in it, and he stands there about 10 minutes. And then he walks over towards my car, and he stops this next car and talks about 10 minutes. About 20 minutes later, he gets in my car. I said, I thought I was supposed to pick you up at 10, Bill. Well, you were, Jerry, but he said, you know, there's lots of lonely people in this world. And he always had time to stop a minute and talk to them. You just waited a few minutes. And that was Bill Glassford. And I think a lot of us don't do that too often. I'm in a hurry. I got to get out there. Jerry Jack's waiting on me, and I got to get there in a hurry because I don't want him to wait any longer. So I walk right by Connie Johnson that was sitting there in the car. Really probably had something to say if I'd have stopped a minute and talked to her, but I was in too big a hurry. So I think these get-togethers are times that we can just have somebody to listen to us. And you know, when we do need to cry, what's important is having a shoulder to cry on. And you know, I can tell Bill Slaughter all my problems. He's not going to judge me. He's not going to tell me, oh, you're full of it, Jerry. Get a hold of yourself. He's going to listen and try to help if he can. The other thing we do in these groups is you support each other. This is a real personal note on my part, and I'll probably have trouble getting through it. Man, your mouth gets dry when you're up here nervous. This is real personal. My daddy was killed in 1958. I had turned 13 1 month before his automobile accident over by Bowie right in front of the Wagon Cellar fruit stand. I wanted to go with him that day. He was going to Fort Worth to see a doctor because a spot had showed up on his lung at Nocona. And they were sending him Fort Worth to a specialist to have that spot evaluated. He left our house at Nocona at 5 o'clock in the morning. I'd thrown a fit the night before to go. In fact, he busted my butt over it. Sent me to bed because I threw this such a fit. He said, son, you'll just be sitting in that waiting room all day down in Fort Worth and nothing to do and nowhere to go. And I wanted to go. He wouldn't let me. At 6:30, we got a phone call. He'd been in a major wreck. We went to the Bowie Hospital. He lived 3 days and died on Sunday morning with me holding his hand. So it really had a profound effect on me at 13 years old. But you know what made me and my mother get through those times? Here's my mother. She was 47. My daddy was 49. Here she is, a widow with a 13-year-old son that's probably a handful. Not probably, was a handful. But you know what really made us get through it was all the Christians in Nocona. We didn't want for nothing. We had some cattle. They loaded those cattle up. I went with them to the Fort Worth stockyards. We sold those cattle down there. Well, I thought that was the neatest thing I'd ever seen. Go down there and walk them wooden rails down through there and tell them buyers my cattle are in pen number 48 or what it was. But it was because other people did it. It wasn't because of us. It wasn't just Methodist Christian friends, but it was the whole community in Nocona that kind of took us under their wings. Another little old personal story. There was a banker down there named Buddy Henley, worked at the People's National Bank. I'm 13 years old. We sold my daddy's cattle. The next year I'm 14. I go into high school and I get into FFA. So I found a cow and a calf at the Bailey's owned that ran the chief picture show at Nocona. They had a cow and a calf for sale for $200. You know how much $200 was in 1959? It was a lot of money. So my mother said, well, go up and see Mr. Henley and see if the bank can work with you. So I go up there and see Buddy Henley at the bank. I said, buddy, I found a county calf, $200 I wanted for an FFA project. He says, okay, Jerry. I said, I'll sell that calf and I'll pay that back on the note, and hopefully she'll breed and we'll have another calf next year, and I'll sell that calf and I'll get this note paid off. He said, okay. He drew up some papers and he handed that paper to me and said, sign it. I signed that paper. 14 years old. He never called my mother. He never asked her to co-sign that note. I know what happened that I got grown. He co-signed that note. Because that board of directors wasn't going to let a $200 note go through there on a 14-year-old kid that didn't have a daddy. So Buddy Henley signed that note. I don't even know what church Buddy Henley went to, but he's been my hero for many years now. But that's just a little, it's just Christian friends that help us. It's what makes us go through life and so forth. You know, last week John talked about the 5 vows we have as church members. He reminded us those vows include our prayers, our presence, our service, our gifts, and our witness. 5, prayers, presence, service, gifts, witness. Prayers, presence, service, gifts, witness. Somebody told me once repetition was good. You know, Christian fellowship is all 5 of those. If we really have Christian fellowship, whether it's in Sunday school class, in that fellowship hall back there, or if it's uptown where 2 or 3 of us met on the street corner and we take time to visit with each other, you know, that's those 5 vows that we made when we became members of this church. The other thing that probably I had, a lot of influence on my life, most of y'all know I'm a pretty strong supporter of Sunday school. And if you're here for church, I'm proud. But you should have been in Sunday school if you wasn't. And the reason I believe that is my mother and daddy, before he died, they told me, you're not going to miss Sunday school. We're all going to go to Sunday school. That was daddy, mother, and me. I've been to Sunday school in Electra, Texas, because that's as far away as we got on vacation when it came Sunday school time. We stopped in Electra, Texas. I was working on a tennis pin, and I thought that's pretty neat. Go to Electra, Texas, but there's a lady in there who'd been 45 years without missing a Sunday. At the time, I might have been 2 or 3 years, maybe 2 or 3 months, I don't know. I finally ended up with 8 years perfect attendance. I go off to college, and my first Sunday in college, I don't have to go. But anyway, they told me, we're going to go to Sunday school and church every Sunday. End of discussion. I don't care. Now, if you're deathly sick, that's a little something different. I think I might have missed once or twice. The only time I missed in 8 years was that Sunday I was holding my daddy's hand when he died, and they gave me an excused absence. Otherwise, I was in church. Well, I remember some of those things 60 years later. I went to band camp when I was in the 8th grade, and one of my best friends happened to go to Church of Christ in Nocona. So Sunday rolled around. That's back when band camp was 2 weeks. You stayed up there over the weekend. You stayed in the dorm. I said, let's go to Sunday school. He said, okay, I want to go to Church of Christ. I said, that's fine with me. I don't care. We walked 1.5 miles from Midwestern to Broad Street Church of Christ, went to Sunday school, and walked back that day. I still remember that. I was 13. I think I was 12 then, because it was the summer before I turned 13. The other thing I remember, I went to Houston Fat Stock Show down there on the dairy judging team back then, and come around Sunday. The only thing I had was a pair of Levi's with cow manure on them, and an old flowery homemade Mrs. Johansson shirt that was made down here at Ringo from Mrs. Johansson. And I said, I got to go to Sunday school. Well, one of my friends said, I'll go with you. I said, okay, let's go. So we go downtown Houston, the First Church Houston. They had an elevator. It went 4 stories high to my Sunday school room in my dirty Levi's and an old flowery cowboy shirt. But I went to Sunday school, and I still remember that to this day. So, needless to say, I think Sunday school is kind of important. The other thing is, if it's not Sunday school, you need to be in some type of fellowship with your fellow Christians. Doris and I was gone 3 months this summer. We left on June the 6th, got home on September 6th, went 10,880 miles through 26 states, went to church 13 Sundays in a row. And that's not to brag. We just may need it more than some of you sometimes. But some of our best experiences, some of our best memories were those occasions. The fellowship we got from fellow Christians that I'll never see again in the rest of my life. But I remember going to that country church in Alabama that was out in the middle of nowhere. And the reason I went down there to this DeSoto State Park is because it was right next to Fort Payne, Alabama. I think great-grandpa started that place. No, I don't think so. But anyway, we went to church there. They were tickled to death. We pulled our Airstream trailer right up in the front of these big old pine trees and went in this little iconic calendar church with a big steeple painted white, and we had a blast. And they were so happy to see us, and we were happy to be there. The other couple ones I really remember, we got to Wakeford City, North Dakota. And if you don't know where that's in that Balkan Shell. It is the boom town of the world right now. In 2010, Doris didn't have 1,200 people, and they got 8,000 now in town. We went to a Wesleyan church. We've been going to Methodist church, and luckily we'd found Methodist every time. That wasn't a requirement. The first thing we'd check was a Methodist church. Well, we got up in North Dakota, and there's not too many Methodist churches, but there's Wesleyan churches. Well, I'll get my little trusty phone out and Google up Wesleyan Church. They're a spinoff from the Methodists back in the 1800s. They're a little more Pentecostal than we are. They had their praise band and their drummer and their bass guitar, and they were pretty good, too. And the preacher got up. I was probably dressed better when I went to downtown Houston church than he was that Sunday, but that didn't matter. He gave a good little talk. And the thing that got Doris and I, in 2010, that church had 30 members. They had 3 services every Sunday morning. It's probably 110, 20 there that when we were there, something like that. That's an estimate. We didn't count. That's a preacher's count. You always have a little higher. So anyway, they have 3 services. They had a bunch of those portable classrooms like you see around half of the schools and stuff sitting out the sides because they're growth. So the preacher got up and he says, next Sunday, everybody be here. He says, next Sunday, all of you come. He said, we got to vote. Next Sunday, we're voting. We put a bid in for this 10 acres of land up by the new high school, and they got a high school up there that makes Northwest look like a little one-room schoolhouse sitting on top of his hill. He said, we're going to vote. We got 10 acres next to it there, and said the trustees met a few Sundays ago, and we decided we'd bid $1.5 million on it, $1.5 million on that 10 acres. And this is on North Dakota land that pre-2010 was worth about $250 an acre. And he said, we went down and saw the trustees for this estate that owns it. I told them we had bid 1.5, and they said, we're asking 2.6 for it. And they said, well, I'm sorry, we just can't get anywhere close to that. 1.5 is all we think church is willing to get into. So they go home. About a week later, the trustee calls them and says, listen, said, we talked to the family, and they said they'd come down to 2.2. He said, I'm sorry, y'all just don't really understand. 1.5 is it, and we think that's more than we probably should obligate, but that's it. Said, we thank you for considering us again. We appreciate it. So what they were going to vote on that next Sunday was that family called them. Said, we're going to sell it to you for $1 million. $500,000 less than they offered. Said, we decided that's what we want to do. I was astounded, 10 acres and $1 million in the middle of North Dakota. But anyway, that family had talked it over and decided they'd sell it to them for $1 million. So they're going to vote on it next Sunday. But what a worship experience we had in Wakeford City, North Dakota. And if you go to Teddy Roosevelt National Park, they're on the north end, outside the gates of the Teddy Roosevelt National Park. Go up there sometime. So the other thing, we go to Montana, and we've worshiped a lot at our daughter and son-in-law's church in Bozeman. It's a Methodist church, and we go there a lot, and we love going there. We get their newsletter, everything. We love going there. So we went there 2 or 3 Sundays, and then we went camping one weekend out, went to a non-denominational church. Doris says, hurry up. I told everybody short. But anyway, we went on our way home. We stopped in Sheridan, Wyoming at the Methodist church there. They had a guy out in the parking lot, an old man about 80-something years old with his overalls. No, he didn't have overalls on. He had Levi's suspenders on like I were out there, and he just was letting everybody park, or if you was a visitor, go in the front, the restrooms to the left. If you're ever traveling and you go to church, first thing you want to know in that church is where's the restroom. So he told that right off. We went in, introduced ourselves to a couple of people, went down set, and they have a greeting time like we do. And this lady in front of me turned around and said, "Y'all from Texas?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am, we are." She said, "Well, I was from Texas." And I said, "Really?" I said, "Great." She said, "I went to school at McMurray." I said, "I went to school at McMurray." She said, "Well, what year were you down there?" I said, 63, and I think she'd got out in 61 or 62. But there we were in Sheridan, Wyoming. But the other thing that stuck out to us, we're on the highway headed for Cheyenne, Wyoming that afternoon about 2 o'clock, and Doris gets her phone out and pulls up the email, and there's "We were really glad to have you at the Sheridan United Methodist Church today and hope your trip to Texas is safe. Hope you enjoy your visit in Wyoming and Colorado on the way home." They had already posted that on our email on the way home, and Doris found it 2 or 3 hours later after we'd left. So it was really important for us to make those connections and so forth. And again, this is not to say we're any better than anybody else because we went to church a few Sundays and so forth. It's what we get out of church that really matters and so forth. Let me see where my notes are. I just left them a while ago. I think that pretty well sums it up anyway. But, you know, when it's all said and done, it's the Christian fellowship that we need and we all desire. Whether it's them 2 or 3, or whether it's our whole worship service in here, or whether it's our Sunday school class of 25 or 30, or whether it's our fellowship time in the back. It's that time to be with each other, to listen to each other, to understand each other, and try to help them if we can. So I hope all of us will just renew that commitment we have to ourselves, and we also have to our Lord Savior Jesus Christ. We have that commitment to have Christian fellowship. Father, we thank Thee for this day. We thank Thee for the wonderful rain You gave us last night. We thank You, Father, that You take care of us and You look over us and You overlook all of our faults. You could have made puppets. Bill Glassford used to tell me, you know, the good Lord could have made us all puppets, but He gave us all a free will and a free mind and a free spirit. Father, help us to become closer to You. Help each one of us to walk with You. Help each one of us to have that Christian fellowship with each other, and may we always take time to listen. We ask these things in Thy holy name.